to www.businesswire.com, and what it does is it lists all the headlines of all the press releases that folks like myself have been submitting. And as you look through there, ask yourself, do I care about any of this? Just by reading the first 15, 20 words. And some of them are actually pretty enticing, and some of them it's like, oh, and a little bit about your press release. I don't know how you want to present it. Well, we were talking about their organization,
Sage Queens. Senior Action in the Gay Environment.
Which is a great topic. Something we don't hear a lot about, older gay and lesbian people. And she had an event
Our fifth anniversary.
And we were talking about what would you put up top, and doing the who, what, when, where, why. But you were talking about your cheer at the Pride Parade, which would be a great lead line, which was
2, 4, 6, 8. How do you know your grandma's straight? Or grandpa.
Which of course would catch my attention. And then just a small explanation of, this issue isn't covered very much, and let's take a look at this. Here's how we can do it.
Thank you.
Chris
was doing a rally after Matthew Shepard murder and didn't get a lot of press coverage, despite the fact that it had the candlelight vigil going for it. So even being bathed in soft candlelight didn't do it. So we talked about ways. Why don't you tell them some of the ways we came up with to increase the likelihood of coverage?
Yeah, one of the things, because we kind of did it a little bit late after the killing happened. We kind of did it like 2 weeks after. It's kind of like Chris was telling me, and Holly said it, how the media has a very short attention span, and the sooner you do it, the better off you are. And so 2 weeks was a little bit too late after the Shepherd meeting. And then also we had talked about bringing a personal story into it, and about somebody maybe that got beaten in San Diego or got hurt, something like in San Diego, regarding that same, because of him being gay. And then the other thing we talked about was whoever that person is, give the media a specific time that person is going to speak. So instead of saying, the rally's from 6 to 8, say, this person is speaking at 7 o'clock. And then even tell them maybe a little earlier, so to make sure that they're there by the time the person's speaking is at 7. Because one of our problems was that we said it was 6 to 8, and they came at 8 o'clock right when we were just finishing our candlelight vigil, and there was only 1 or 2 news crews there. So, and I think, is that it?
That's basically it. And even when it comes down to when to have your best person speaking, do it so that it's going to work by the time deadlines for local TV news, so that you can hit the 6 p.m. newscast. The easier you make it for them, the better.
Or if you have a 10 o'clock newscast,
right,
and it's a candlelight visual, they can do a live shot and make it a really, really big deal.
Right.
If you do it right then, too.
Except with rules for one of their games, and campus activities put their stamp of approval on it, and it was hung all around our campus. And then the week following National Coming Out Day, which there really wasn't an alliance, so the only thing that actually happened was there was an article put in our newspaper saying what National Coming Out Day is, listing some famous people who are gay and saying, if you're gay and need, support on this campus, give Professor Woodruff a call, and he had his, contacts on there. The following week, there was an article published saying National Coming Out Day should go back into the closet, and some people were furious about it, but the writer got lots of letters of support personally, and then there were letters of support the following week, and letters, condemning what he had written. About 3 pages in the week following, and then another page of letters to the editors the week after. And I really wanted to get some more media coverage off of the campus to let the gay community of Indianapolis know what was going on in the larger community of Indianapolis, keep them updated. But I just wasn't sure how to go about it. And I contacted some newspapers, one newspaper in particular, who sounded really excited to do it. I gave them all the information, including the articles and the letters of the editor, the sign, some personal stories. and they wanted to do it, and I gave them contacts, and the next week I just saw a bunch of Butler University ads in the newspaper. So, I wasn't sure quite how to handle that.
So I think we came up with a few ideas. Didn't get to a lot yet, but Jen has contacted the gay press in Indianapolis, and they're going to do something about it, right? You're going to write a story,
Right.
which is good. And I asked her about the daily newspaper there. She said that the Indianapolis Star is extremely right-wing and unfriendly to gay issues. And I said, nonetheless, is there somebody there whose stories you read and think they might be a good, be able to be a good ear for you? And she said that she doesn't read the newspaper, and I said that's a big mistake. Whatever your mainstream media is in your community, whether you like it or not, if you want to engage them, you better know them. If you don't care to engage them and you don't like the newspaper, then fine, don't read it. But you can't really expect anything out of them if you don't know what you're dealing with. Coming out day, going back in the closet, generated a lot of letters in response, and I think maybe that might be the appropriate way to handle that. Cindy talked about sometimes it's a calendar event, sometimes it's an op-ed piece, sometimes it's a front page story. If somebody writes an op-ed piece saying they don't like gay people and coming out day, well, then other people can write letters to the editor. And I think Jen also tried to get some sort of contact with the editor of the newspaper about having an op-ed piece stating the need for coming out day and why that's important. So you want to have a direct contact with that editor, call him up, go in and see him and say, this sentence, this phrase, that paragraph really pissed me off, and if you're going to run something like this, you need to have something explaining the other position, and here's a 500-word op-ed piece I'd like you to run.
Good workshop.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thanks. It was great having all the journalists in there
Yeah.
to share,
I wanted to hear that Sally asked Chris. Cindy Abel, Real World Communications. We're at the Creative Change Conference, and you just did a workshop on media. Give us that last 25 minutes, 25 words of a summary about what people should do, gay organizations do to get to the press and the broadcast media.
Some of the most effective ways of making sure that we have accurate and inclusive coverage is by making sure that we know, first of all, what it is that we most want to communicate, to be clear, to be concise, to be complete, to provide the news media with all the information they need, the who, what, when, where, why, how much of an event or something that's taking place, and also to provide it within their time frame, to know when the deadlines are, and also to know what is the way in which they want to receive information. Do they prefer a fax or a phone call, an email or a hard copy? Find out what it is that they need and provide it to them in a timely manner.
So a lot of people take email now versus a hand-delivered kind of copy, hard copy?
That's what most folks prefer, particularly within the print, with a newspaper or magazine. With regard to a news desk, for example, email or a fax is typically good with a television news desk. Same thing with radio, but also a follow-up phone call because they're very busy, and rather than it being an individual reporter or editor making the decision, it's usually a assignment desk editor who's making the decision on several different stories, and so some follow-up can help.
Real World Communications, I don't know how many years old it is now, but you sort of created a niche of PR firm representing a lot of gay organizations. Is this kind of a specialty for you?
Representing niche markets is definitely our specialty, and within that, almost half of our clients, whether they're gay or straight-owned businesses, are folks who are targeting the gay and lesbian market, whether it's a nonprofit or a retail, such as the Greater Atlanta Business Coalition being nonprofit, retail, such as Outright Bookstore, or others, like labamerica.com, who are simply looking to reach our community with their products or services.
Tell us about your GABC award. What was that about?
I was so excited to get that. It's wonderful to work with an organization that is really investing in itself and finding new ways to reach its members and to support its members. So to receive that award in marketing and also as Business of the Year was just a wonderful tribute to what the organization is doing and the role that they've allowed me to play in supporting them.
Give us a brief description of what the organization does.
It's the Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce. It serves folks, whether they're gay or lesbian business owners, or they're simply, fair-minded business owners who want to work with and support fellow business owners within the gay and lesbian community. So it's the Gay and Lesbian Chamber.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Stay right there and just keep talking.
Yeah, okay. Music can do a reverse.
So y'all covering the whole conference?
No, just selectively.
Oh, really?
What we can get.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously you can't be in every
Yeah,
single
no,
room.
we've
but-
been here for 2 days now, and
Oh my gosh.
yeah, so we're
How's it
getting a lot.
going?
Good.
Yeah?
Lots of
Is it a
stuff.
good conference?
I think it's an excellent conference.
Yeah, that's
From what
great.
we've seen.
Yeah.
What about GABC, and what about your award?
It was fantastic to receive such an award and to receive, the support of my fellow business people. I'm glad that what we're doing as an organization is working. The organization is growing. It was a tremendous dinner, as you know. We had almost 3 times the attendance that we did in previous years. Twice the amount of corporate sponsorships. So it's just a tribute to the work of the folks who are involved in the organization.
We're going to intercut that. Maybe just a quick sum.
Shall I look at you at the camera?
Talk to me.
Never know how it works.
Chris Crain from Southern Voice and Window Media. First of all, this was a neat conference on media and at the Creating Change conference. If you had 25 words to sum it up, what's the importance of getting to the gay press?
Well, I think the message we were sending out for gay organizations who want coverage in the gay press is oftentimes what they're approaching, the stories they approach us with are stories that the gay press has done over and over again. An event that's an annual event or an organizational meeting that happens on a regular basis. And the way to pitch that story that makes it more likely to get covered and covered more with more visibility is to bring a personal angle to it. If there's a personal story you can tell that relates to what your upcoming event is, it's much more likely to get coverage. And even more important than that, it's much more likely to get read. Because if we do a story that just says Organization X, Organization Q is going to hold a meeting, people are not going to read that story unless they recognize the name of the organization, the headline, and they're already interested. But if we tell a story about someone and we've got a visual of that person, it's much more likely to get read by people who are not already involved in the organization and may think, well, hey, that's something I'd like to get involved in. I may show up for that meeting.
So what's the best way to communicate to you all?
With Southern Voice?
Yes.
I think the best way to get in touch with us is to, first of all, know who to contact. If you've got a news story to pitch, call our managing editor or email our managing editor with that story idea. Or if it's a local news story in Atlanta, call the Atlanta editor, who's Laura Brown, and her extension and her email address are in our staff box, so it's really easy to find in the newspaper. And then pitch that story directly to that person. And if you're not satisfied with what you're getting from anyone on our staff, I'm always available for being my phone number and email are right there.
It
in
stops
the
at the
box.
top?
Absolutely.
Now, you acquired Southern Voice in 1997, and shortly after that, Houston Voice.
Right.
And more recently, the Impact News out of New Orleans.
Right.
Tell us about this expanded regional coverage of you all.
Well, what we decided to do after we'd had the New Orleans paper for a while, it's biweekly, and New Orleans is a smaller city, and a lot of the businesses are tourism related, and we found it was difficult to take the New Orleans paper weekly like we wanted to, so it was more relevant and had more timely information for people who live in New Orleans. And so the best way to accomplish that from our perspective was to combine the New Orleans paper into the Southern Voice. And the great thing about that from my perspective was it allowed us also to cover all these areas between Atlanta and New Orleans where I think a lot of the real stories of the gay rights movement are being told. It's easier to be gay in Atlanta, Georgia than it is to be gay in Nashville, Tennessee, or even less in some small town in Alabama. And so we're now developing the context to tell stories that are often more compelling than the stories that come out of Atlanta because there's much more discrimination and much less tolerance in these areas that are outside major metropolitan areas.
So what has this done to your circulation numbers?
Our circulation's gone up from about 30,000 to 45,000. That's actual number of papers we put out. And in the media business, you talk about the number of readers you have for each issue. And so we estimate we have over 100,000 readers now. And it makes us the largest gay paper in the country, which is something we're very excited about,
That's
too.
great. Now let me trace a little bit of your personal history. You started out in Little Rock and Memphis in a Methodist Republican family, conservative upbringing. And you went to Vanderbilt. You didn't study journalism, though, at Vanderbilt, did you?
No, at Vanderbilt's a liberal arts school, and they consider journalism to be vocational, so they didn't have classes in journalism. But I was editor of my college paper.
And you were doing some work with the paper there.
Right, the local mainstream daily there is called the Tennessean, and I was a reporter there.
So then you went off to Harvard Law School, and then what happened?
Once I finished law school, I came to Atlanta for a judicial clerkship, and then started practicing law in Washington, and then moved to Atlanta about 6 years ago and started practicing law with a big firm in Atlanta. And I enjoyed the practice of law. I just didn't find it fulfilling, and wanted to try something different. And I had really gotten a lot more fire in my belly about the journalism I did before. And so I actually applied for a job at the Southern Voice to be their managing editor for a salary that would have been about a fifth of what I was making. And they wouldn't even interview me. I think they didn't take me seriously, and I don't blame them for not taking me seriously because it just seemed out of the blue, the application. So when they wouldn't hire me, I started putting together people to actually buy the paper, which is something we did 3 years ago. And I've loved it ever since. I mean, it's great to get back to it.
So what is your general editorial philosophy?
I want to challenge our readers. I don't believe in newspapers that only tell you what you already agree with. I've always been frustrated with mainstream newspapers that waste editorial space talking about how bad the weather's been or about, issues in which regional people don't disagree. So if I'm reaching a gay audience, I want to not just tell them discrimination against gay people is bad. I want to challenge them with things they might not agree with. Gay people who think the hate crimes law is thought control, or things that will challenge their own preconceived notions about what's right and what's wrong. Because I think it makes for a more interesting newspaper, and it also challenges you to think more about what our movement's about.
Well, as you know, OutTV Atlanta is fairly new to this whole business of coverage of the gay community. How do you see broadcasting doing the same kind of things you're doing?
Oh, I think it's great. I think you've got a medium to reach people that print journalism can't do, although with the internet that also allows that ability. But I think the more personal stories that TV can tell, you've got a visual ability that we don't, to really to have someone tell their personal story, and you can see the look on their face when they talk about the discrimination they've suffered, or I haven't really suffered discrimination, but when you can tell a personal story in a more compelling way on TV, it's what TV's always been able to do that print can't. And I think you can reach not just gay people, which and our audience is primarily gay, but you've got people clicking through the channels who will come across your program that have no connection with the gay community, and that's a real educational opportunity.
Chris Crain, many thanks. We look forward to working with you.
Look forward to it too.
Chris Crain, tell us about Southern Voice.
Well, we're the weekly gay newspaper in Atlanta, Georgia, and we just recently expanded to cover the rest of the South, and
now the big boys.
Right, ready to take on the Western world.